The clarity of mind that many believe is lost forever after the age of 50 is actually waiting to be reclaimed through a fundamental shift in how the brain is nourished. The prevailing myth suggests that cognitive decline, memory fog, and a scattering of attention are inevitable consequences of aging, a biological script that cannot be rewritten. This fatalistic view ignores the immense plasticity of a nervous system and its ability to regenerate when provided with the correct inputs. By understanding the specific mechanism that drains mental vitality and learning to administer a potent, restorative nutrient to the nervous system, the aging process transforms from a steep decline into a plateau of wisdom and acuity. The approach, grounded in the work of John Kabat-Zinn, reveals that the brain remains capable of profound structural growth when the toxic load of chronic stress is replaced by a sustained, physiological state of mindful presence. The physiology of stress and cognitive decline, the biological narrative of the aging brain, is often told as a story of inevitable loss. Yet the true antagonist is frequently the invisible, corrosive accumulation of chronic stress hormones. When an individual crosses the threshold of 50, the body has often endured decades of a hyper-aroused state known as the fight-or-flight response, which floods the system with cortisol. This biochemical environment is particularly damaging to the hippocampus, the region of the brain responsible for memory formation and emotional regulation, which is highly sensitive to cortisol toxicity. The constant pressure to perform, the rushing through daily tasks, and the endless loop of worry create a neural climate where brain cells are literally starved of the resources they need to thrive. It is not merely that the brain gets older. It is that the brain is consistently deprived of its recovery phase, leading to a state of exhaustion that masquerades as dementia or age-related decline. The hidden nutrient that acts as the antidote to this depletion is not a pill or a supplement, but a specific quality of oxygenated, non-judgmental attention that fundamentally alters the brain's chemistry. John Kabat-Zinn suggests that this quality of awareness acts as a metabolic regulator, shifting the nervous system from a catabolic state of breakdown to an anabolic state of repair. Most people move through their days in a state of continuous partial attention, where the mind is split between the task at hand and a running commentary of judgment and anticipation. This split consumes an immense amount of neural glucose and oxygen, leaving little energy for the actual maintenance of cognitive function. When the individual learns to anchor attention in the immediate sensory experience, the drain on these resources stops, and the brain begins to access a reservoir of energy that was previously squandered on anxious ruminations. A crucial mechanism in this process is the restoration of the breath as the primary vehicle for delivering this nutrient of awareness to the nervous system. In a state of chronic distraction, breathing becomes shallow and thoracic, signaling the brain that a threat is imminent and keeping the sympathetic nervous system in overdrive. By consciously shifting to a rhythmic, abdominal breath, the individual stimulates the vagus nerve, which acts as a brake on the stress response and floods the brain with fresh oxygen. This is not simply a relaxation technique, but a physiological intervention that lowers blood pressure and reduces the inflammatory markers that are linked to Alzheimer's and cognitive impairment. The practice of returning to the breath over and over again strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for executive function, focus, and decision-making. It is understandable that one might feel skeptical about the power of something as simple as attention to reverse physical changes in the brain. The modern world conditions people to believe that complex problems require complex external solutions, and that a remedy found within one's own physiology cannot possibly be powerful enough to combat aging. This skepticism itself acts as a barrier, keeping the mind locked in the very patterns of cynicism and judgment that perpetuate the stress cycle. However, the science of neuroplasticity supports the view that the brain changes shape based on how it is used, and that directing attention in specific ways causes measurable thickening in the cortical regions associated with memory and sensory processing. The nutrient is the attention itself, directed with kindness and precision, acting as a fertilizer for neural connections. Consider the scenario of a person who constantly misplaces their keys or forgets names, attributing these lapses to senior moments with a sense of resignation. In this moment of forgetting, the typical reaction is one of frustration, self-criticism, and a spike in anxiety, which only further clouds the mind and inhibits memory retrieval. By applying the principles of mindfulness, the individual learns to pause in that moment of lapse, suspending the judgment and simply observing the sensation of not knowing. This pause prevents the cortisol spike, keeps the neural pathways open, and often allows the memory to surface naturally once the interference of anxiety is removed. The practice turns a moment of potential deficit into a moment of training, where the brain is taught to remain calm and open rather than contracting in fear. This approach requires a significant shift from the doing mode of mind, which is obsession with goals and outcomes, to the being mode, which rests in the reality of the present moment. In the doing mode, the mind is always time-traveling to the past or future, a metabolic activity that is incredibly expensive for the aging brain to maintain. The being mode conserves energy, allowing the biological systems of the body to prioritize cellular repair and the consolidation of memory. It is a reclaiming of the life force that is usually leaked away through the cracks of distraction and worry. The restoration of memory is, therefore, not just about recalling facts, but about re-inhabiting the life that is happening right now with a level of vividness that encodes experiences deeply into the neural fabric. How much of my mental fog is actually just the exhaustion of constant worry? The neurobiology of mindful restoration, the structural transformation of the brain through the consistent application of mindful awareness, is one of the most compelling discoveries in modern neuroscience. Research adjacent to Kabat-Zinn's work has demonstrated that the amygdala, the brain's alarm bell, actually shrinks in volume after only 8 weeks of consistent mindfulness practice. For the individual over 50, this is a profound physiological reset, implying that the baseline level of fear and reactivity can be lowered permanently. When the amygdala is less active, it ceases to hijack the resources of the rest of the brain, allowing the hippocampus to resume its work of knitting together new memories. This is the biological basis for the sensation of clearing the fog. It is the literal quieting of the noise that prevents clear signal transmission between neurons. This process relies heavily on the concept of neurogenesis, the creation of new neurons, which was once thought to be impossible in the adult human brain. It is now understood that the brain retains the capacity to generate new cells throughout the lifespan, provided the chemical environment is hospitable. The nutrient of mindful presence creates this hospitable environment by reducing the neurotoxins associated with chronic stress and increasing the production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. This protein acts like a growth hormone for brain cells, encouraging them to branch out and form new connections with their neighbors. The practice of paying attention on purpose, in the present moment and non-judgmentally, stimulates the release of BDNF, effectively rewiring the brain for greater resilience and flexibility. A common counterexample to this progress is the misconception that mindfulness requires the cessation of thought, a goal that is both impossible and frustrating for the beginner. When a person attempts to clear the mind and inevitably fails, they may conclude that the practice is not working or that their brain is too far gone to be helped. However, the efficacy of this nutrient does not depend on a silent mind, but on a changed relationship with the noise. The moment the individual notices that the mind has wandered is the moment of strengthening. It is the rep in the mental gym that builds the muscle of focus. Every time attention is gently escorted back to the breath or the sensory experience, the neural pathway of executive control is reinforced, making it easier to concentrate in the future. The midpoint payoff of this practice becomes evident when the individual notices a widening of the gap between a stimulus and their response to it. In the past, a stressful event, such as a rude comment or a sudden change in plans, would trigger an immediate, automatic reaction of anger or panic. As the brain structures change, a space opens up where the individual can choose a response that is measured and intelligent rather than reactive. This emotional regulation is a key component of memory preservation, as high emotional arousal often interferes with the accurate encoding of events. By remaining improved in emotional equilibrium, the aging brain can process information more efficiently, separating the signal of the event from the noise of the emotional reaction. Consider the daily activity of listening to a partner or a friend, a common area where memory complaints arise. Often, the listener is not truly hearing the words, but is rehearsing their own response or judging what is being said, leading to a failure to encode the conversation. By applying the nutrient of full presence, the listener drops the rehearsal and devotes all cognitive resources to the act of reception. The speaker's words are heard with clarity, the tone is registered, and the facial expressions are noted, creating a rich, multi-sensory memory trace that is easily retrieved later. This depth of connection not only improves memory, but also revitalizes relationships, which are themselves a crucial factor in long-term cognitive health. The mechanism of attention also serves to reintegrate the body and mind, which often become dissociated with age as physical discomforts arise. The tendency is to numb oneself to the body to avoid feeling aches or fatigue, but this numbing cuts the brain off from vital sensory feedback. Kabat-Zinn emphasizes the body scan as a way to reconnect with the physical form, sweeping attention through the body from toe to head. This practice remaps the somatosensory cortex, keeping the brain's representation of the body sharp and accurate. It turns the physical vessel from a source of complaint into a grounding anchor for the wandering mind, stabilizing attention in the here and now. Where in my body do I physically feel the tightness of holding on to the past? Integrating awareness into metabolic rhythms, the application of this restorative nutrient must move beyond formal meditation sessions and permeate the metabolic rhythms of daily life to be truly effective for the aging brain. The concept of informal practice is essential here, as it transforms mundane activities into opportunities for neural strengthening. Eating, for example, is often performed unconsciously while reading, watching television, or planning the rest of the day, leading to poor digestion and a lack of satisfaction. When the act of eating becomes a mindful experience, engaging the senses of sight, smell, texture, and taste, the brain is flooded with sensory data that keeps it active and engaged. This mindful eating not only prevents overconsumption, but also trains the brain to extract maximum pleasure and information from small inputs, a skill that translates to better cognitive efficiency in all areas. Walking offers another potent opportunity to integrate this attentional nutrient, transforming a simple physical exercise into a cognitive workout. Instead of walking to get somewhere or listening to a podcast to drown out the silence, the individual can focus on the sensation of the feet touching the ground, the rhythm of the gait, and the movement of the air against the skin. This walking meditation coordinates the motor cortex with the sensory systems, demanding a level of integration that challenges the brain in a healthy way. It grounds the awareness in the physical reality of the moment, preventing the mind from drifting into the abstract worries that drain mental energy. This practice of grounding is particularly vital for balance and coordination, functions that rely heavily on a sharp connection between the brain and the peripheral nervous system. There is a distinct difference between thinking about the present moment and actually being in it, a nuance that often trips up those attempting to integrate this practice. Thinking about the present is just another form of mental chatter, a layer of narration that separates the individual from the direct experience. Being in the present involves a drop in conceptualization, a shift to direct sensing where the brain is receiving raw data rather than processing symbols. For the brain over 50, which has spent decades relying on shorthand symbols and habits to save energy, this return to raw sensing is like waking up a dormant muscle. It forces the brain to abandon its predictive coding, where it guesses what is happening, and actually look at what is there, refreshing the perception of the world. A powerful limitation to this integration is the deep-seated cultural conditioning that equates value with speed and multitasking. The individual may feel a sense of guilt or laziness when slowing down to perform a task with full attention, as if they are violating a social contract of productivity. However, the efficiency of the aging brain relies on doing one thing at a time with high quality, rather than many things poorly. The scattershot approach of multitasking increases the production of stress hormones and fragments memory, making it difficult to recall where the day went. By giving permission to be monotasking, the individual protects their cognitive reserve and actually accomplishes tasks with fewer errors and less fatigue. A practical scenario involves the transition moments of the day, such as moving from the car to the house or from one room to another. These transition points are often lost time, where the mind is already ahead at the next destination. By consciously using these transitions to take 3 deep, mindful breaths, the individual resets the nervous system before engaging with the next demand. This prevents the accumulation of stress residue from one task to the next, keeping the mind clear and the emotional slate clean. It is a form of micro-recovery that ensures the brain does not reach the point of exhaustion by the evening. The integration of this perspective also involves a radical acceptance of the current state of the mind and body, rather than a constant striving for how things should be. Kabat-Zinn teaches that the fighting against reality is what causes the most suffering and depletion. If the knee hurts, the mind acknowledges the pain without adding a story of despair to it. If a name is forgotten, the mind acknowledges the blankness without adding a story of incompetence. This non-judgmental stance conserves the massive amount of energy that is usually wasted on resistance, freeing it up to be used for observation, enjoyment, and the actual retrieval of information. What task am I rushing through today that could be a source of calm if I slow down? Sustaining mental acuity through the journey of restoring brain and memory function after 50 is ultimately a practice of befriending the mind in its current state, rather than trying to force it into the mold of a younger self. The conclusion of this process is not the achievement of a perfect brain that never forgets, but the cultivation of a resilient brain that recovers quickly and retains its plasticity. The cumulative effect of a nutrient of presence is a nervous system that is less brittle and more adaptive. As the years progress, this adaptability becomes the true measure of health, allowing the individual to navigate the inevitable changes of aging with grace and humor rather than fear. The brain that is bathed in awareness is a brain that continues to learn, not necessarily academic facts, but the deeper curriculum of living fully. This sustained practice creates a virtuous cycle where the benefits of clarity and calm reinforce the desire to practice. The initial effort required to drag the attention back to the breath eventually gives way to a natural resting in awareness, where the mind prefers the peace of the present to the chaos of distraction. The neural pathways of focus become the path of least resistance, making the state of mindfulness a default setting rather than a strenuous task. This is the fulfillment of the promise that the brain can indeed change. It settles into a new equilibrium where the preservation of memory and cognitive function is a byproduct of a well-lived, attentive life. The long-term view requires a shift in identity from one who is a victim of aging to one who is an active participant in the unfolding of their own consciousness. The stories that are told about getting older, that it is a time of withdrawal and dimming, are challenged by the vibrant reality of a mind that is awake. The connection to the world remains vital and curious, driven by an attention that finds novelty in the familiar. This curiosity is neuroprotective, keeping the dopamine systems active and the spirit engaged. The hidden nutrient was never external. It was the capacity for awareness that was always present, waiting to be tapped. As the individual moves forward, the tools of breath, body scanning, and mindful movement become companions that offer a sanctuary of stability in a changing world. The fear of memory loss is replaced by a confidence in the ability to handle whatever the present moment brings. The brain is no longer an enemy that is failing, but a trusted organ that responds to kindness and care. By consistently feeding the mind with the oxygen of presence, the years over 50 become a time of deepening clarity, where the wisdom of experience is illuminated by the light of a sharp and focused attention. Who would I be if I stopped treating my own aging mind as a problem to be solved?